She sat frozen in her chair, eyes suddenly glassed over, lips trying not to tremble. Janelle was done holding it together. The silence between them said everything. He didn't get it. He hadn't listened. In that moment, you could see her shut down inside. All that time, all those years she put into this family. And now, not a shred of warmth or understanding from the man who vowed to protect her. His apology was cold, distant, meant more for the camera than for the woman in front of him. Janelle stared ahead, words stuck in her throat, then she said it quietly, but it landed like a bomb. You didn't have my back. And he didn't, not once. Not when the family crumbled around them. Not when she was left to raise their kids in survival mode. Not when she fought alongside other wives to keep things balanced, while he lived like a king behind Robyn's gates. She knew this meeting wouldn't heal anything, but even she didn't expect it to feel like this. Discarded, blamed, invisible. But what no one saw coming is what happened next. Because behind the scenes, Janelle wasn't falling apart. She was gathering strength. And surprisingly, Meri was right there. The same woman who once said they didn't even have a friendship anymore. The woman who, for years, Kody used as a scapegoat between the others. The one who had every reason to be bitter, silent, done. She of all people, was quietly stepping back into the picture. Not to fight for him, but to help Janelle walk away from him. This was not the reunion the cameras expected. This was not two ex-wives gossiping quietly in the corner. This was something bigger. Something this family hasn't seen before. Two women, long divided, standing shoulder to shoulder for the first time in years. Their histories are complex, twisted by petty jealousies, Kody's favoritism, and a religion that told them to stay silent. But now, staring into the same emptiness left by a man who abandoned them both, they found something startling. Clarity, and each other. What's wild is, it didn't start as a plan. Meri didn't come to Janelle with strategy. Janelle didn't ask Meri for rescue. No, it happened in those quiet, confusing, broken moments. When the spiritual release became a conversation, not just a thought. When one decided to text the church leaders. When the other replied, "Do it, send it, I'll be here." And just like that, in the ashes of their loyalty to a man who promised forever but gave them excuses and exile, two women finally began to turn inward. Toward themselves. Toward each other. But what does it really mean to seek a spiritual release from a marriage that's already over? On paper, Janelle was never legally tied to him. The law won't stop her from leaving. But the church? That's another story entirely. When your soul feels trapped by a higher promise, it isn't divorce papers that set you free, it's permission. Permission from men in charge, men like Kody once pretended to be, men like the ones who might try to stop them. And that's where it gets dangerous for the empire Kody built. Because if Meri and Janelle walk away without fear, if they get that release, spiritually and emotionally, it doesn't end with them. It sets a fire under the whole foundation. It tells every other woman, including Robyn, that this kingdom was a lie, that they were not chosen, they were ruled. But even with that realization stirring, nothing in this story feels resolved. Not the pain, not the betrayal, not the terrible way they were turned against each other by the man they all bent their hearts for. Because now, it's different. The split isn't about jealousy anymore, it's about dignity. It's about waking up. And as Kody continues to spin a version of this story that paints him as a victim of their resentment and rage, Meri and Janelle are slowly slipping from his grip and taking the truth with them. They're not loud, they're not fiery, but they're moving. And for the first time in years, they're saying no together. But what happens when Robyn finds out that they've gone around them, through the church, and made decisions without their approval? What happens when the retaliation comes? Keep watching because next, things get personal. There was a moment, sitting across from him, when Janelle realized she wasn't angry anymore. She was emptied out. Nothing he said could reach her. And maybe, deep down, that silence inside her, that numbness, was more terrifying than any fight they'd ever had. For decades, she had stood beside him, worked beside the other wives, raised her children with grit and quiet strength. Not once demanding to be favored, not once asking for more than she gave. But what did it all lead to? Nothing but a cold explanation. An apology that felt like a lecture, smothered in excuses. He looked right at her and said, "I'm sorry for not protecting you back then." Back then. As if the hurt had an expiration date. As if the consequences stopped after the early years. But all she could hear was the same old message. "I failed you, but let's pretend I didn't." And it wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, the way he turned the apology into a blame-shifting moment. He brought up Meri, accused her of making things hard between them. As if she, Janelle, didn't survive the same dynamic. As if tension between wives was a cause, not a symptom of the broken family system he created. She sat through that painful conversation with her hands folded, lips pressed tight, holding every insult inside. But when she finally spoke, the truth slipped out, low and steady. "You didn't protect me," she said. "You never had my back." And in that moment, something inside her finally came loose. She wasn't waiting for him to see her anymore. The man she married spiritually, the father of her children, wasn't ever going to show up. Not like she needed, not like she deserved. That truth cuts different when it finally lands. And in the quiet after that sentence, Janelle understood this wasn't a pause or a phase. It was the end of loyalty. The moment she stopped expecting anything different. Because if we're being honest, she's been surviving, not thriving, for years. When the family made the move to Flagstaff, that's when the cracks turned into chasms. Kody pulled further away, found comfort only with Robyn, and left the rest of them to navigate life on the outskirts. Janelle tried to keep the peace. She gave up the idea of getting affection for the sake of avoiding chaos. She showed up for the kids, showed up for the land dispute, showed up for logistics. And all the while, he only showed up where he wanted, when he wanted. Often not at all. During the pandemic, when tensions reached their breaking point, he made it clear his rules mattered more than their feelings. They weren't equals anymore. They were assistants to his household. Janelle challenged it, but every pushback was met with stonewalls. He questioned her commitments, doubted her intentions, and slowly she stopped defending herself, stopped trying to win what he'd already given away. This was years in the making, this cold distance between them, lonely holidays, phone calls that never happened, kids growing up away from their father, a marriage of gaps and guessing games, and still she stayed. She stayed because she believed that family mattered more than hurt feelings. She stayed for the dream they once shared: lands, kids, faith, community. But faith only holds you up for so long when there's no love in it anymore. So when the topic of spiritual release came up, it wasn't shocking to her. It felt natural, not easy but necessary. The paperwork wasn't about ending a marriage, it was about ending a lie. About letting go of a weight she wasn't meant to carry alone anymore. Meri had done it, quietly, with dignity, no spectacle, and when Janelle saw that, something inside her clicked. This wasn't weakness. This was clarity, this was freedom. So she pulled out her phone, opened the conversation thread, and texted the person she never thought she'd lean on again. "Hey, can you tell me how you did it?" And within minutes, Meri answered. "You thinking about it?" "I think I already did," Janelle replied. And in that single line, everything shifted. Because once she said it out loud, there was no going back. Not in her heart, not in her spirit, not even in her faith. Maybe not everyone believed this moment had meaning. Maybe Kody still thought no one would follow through. But Janelle wasn't asking anymore. She was answering. For years, Meri stayed quiet. She smiled when producers asked questions. She nodded when the others avoided her. She kept showing up to family events, even when there was no seat saved for her, no space carved out beyond what was required. On camera, she was the loyal first wife. Reserved, polished. But off-screen, she was a shadow drifting slowly out of a home built on promises that never included her dreams. Once, she believed in the family more than anything. She believed in the principle, the unity, and in Kody's vision. She married him young, believed in who he said he was. A spiritual leader, a husband to be proud of, a man building something sacred. But as time moved forward, as wives were added and Robyn became the centerpiece of his devotion, Meri became obsolete, not out loud, not officially, but silently, subtly, and cruelly. It didn't happen all at once. The real betrayal came dressed in the robes of reason. It came with calm voices and phrases like, "This is just so we can adopt the kids." She gave up her legal status as a wife for Robyn's sake because she believed this was what good family women did. She signed those divorce papers while choking back tears, and Kody hugged her like it was a difficult business decision. Nothing more. That was the start. Not of the end, but of something worse: irrelevance. After that, she no longer existed in decisions. She heard about family plans after the fact. Holidays came and went without real invitations. Her pain was politely ignored. Every tough conversation was met with a wall of piety, especially from Robyn, who always insisted they were sisters, while slowly closing every emotional door behind her. And Kody, he didn't even hide it anymore. He said it. He didn't consider himself married to Meri, that they were like exes living in proximity, And somehow to him, that wasn't cruel. That was truth. But truth cuts deeper when it comes from the one you once trusted with your whole life. So Meri stopped asking to be included. She stopped asking him to care. She tried to focus on herself, her businesses, healing. But still, the damage lingered. Her loyalty, weaponized by both of them, made her seem like the one who couldn't move on. The one who chose to stay behind. And the world watched her as the leftovers of the Brown family narrative, the tag-along wife who wouldn't leave, until something shifted. It started small. She noticed Janelle pulling away. Not just in anger, but with purpose. She watched the same words shared with her years ago now being tossed at Janelle. Accusations of disloyalty, of emotional betrayal, of causing stress. She watched Kody belittle Janelle in the same cold tone he used on her. She watched Robyn sit quietly, enabling it all, pretending to be the bridge while secretly holding all the keys. That's when it became clear. It was never really about Meri, it was about control. And the more she withheld her voice, the more they painted her into their version of events. If she didn't speak, they'd write the ending for her. But now, this was her moment to take the pen back. So when Janelle reached out, Meri didn't hesitate, not to be noble, not to be the better person, but because, deep down, she knew what it meant to feel trapped under spiritual promises turned to chains. She knew what it meant to believe you'd lose your family in the next life if you dared to prioritize your peace in this one. She knew, and she wasn't going to stand by and let someone else suffer through it alone. Helping Janelle wasn't about unity or redemption, it was about dignity. It was about finally calling bluff on the lies they'd been sold. About standing in quiet defiance without needing to shout to be heard. What started as one message turned into several conversations. Respectful, honest, even awkward, but real. And in those conversations, something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, Meri felt seen, not pitied, not dismissed. Seen, it wasn't revenge, it wasn't a power move. It was the moment they both acknowledged the same truth out loud. He never protected either of them. And without saying it directly, they took their first steps towards something Kody never saw coming: each other. For years, they crafted an image, a united front, devoted and pious, calm in storms that they claimed were caused by everyone else. Kody and Robyn, the chosen two, the wise ones, the calm in a family filled with chaos. That's how they wanted the world to see them. The power couple. The ones holding it all together while the rest of the wives fell apart around them. But if you watch closely, it was never peace. It was power, disguised as sacrifice. And now, that veil is finally burning off. There's something chilling about control when it wears a soft face. Robyn spent years claiming she just wanted sisterhood, harmony, fairness. She spoke about love, about doing what's right for the family. But behind those glossy eyes and trembling voice was a woman who benefited the most by everyone else being pushed out of the frame. The quiet manipulation didn't always sound cruel, but the result was always the same: less of everyone else, more of her. It didn't start with conflict, it started with choice, with time, with presence. When Kody stopped coming around, when the visits turned into excuses, the rules grew strict for Janelle's house, confusingly relaxed at Robyn's. Safety became subjective, pandemic visits became loyalty tests, and one by one, the other wives realized nothing was mutual anymore. There was no balance. There were favorites and forgotten, and Robyn didn't have to raise her voice to win. She had something no one else did: consistent proximity. She didn't have to fight for his attention, everyone else did. While Janelle fought COVID protocols and Christine worked through separation from the family system, Robyn simply stayed quiet, stayed beside him, stayed protected. With her, he smiled. With them, he snapped. But the cracks started long before the pandemic enforced physical distance. Go back to the legal divorce. Meri signed away her marriage, smiling through her tears so that Robyn could have custody of her children. It was framed as a legal necessity, a gesture for the kids, a small temporary pivot, but it was never small and it was never temporary. Because after that paper was signed, nothing was the same. The family shifted on its axis. Robyn became the lone legal wife, official, protected. The rest lost their footing and never fully got it back. That signature opened a door, and once they walked through it, they couldn't return to how it was before. Then came the financial shift. Questions about who paid what turned into hidden details. Janelle started noticing things, discrepancies, concerns about fairness. Resources seemed to pour in one direction while the rest were left to make do. Property, money, investment, Everything seemed tangled in red tape that somehow always unraveled in Robyn's favor. And anyone who asked too many questions became disrespectful. That's the word Kody always pulled out. Loyalty, respect, obedience, not love, and certainly not equality. He tried to say he was burdened, torn between too many people. But his actions were clear. There was one woman he protected, one home he rested in, and one story he wanted the viewers to believe. That the others were bitter. That Robyn was his only true partner. That only one wife ever kept her word. But the truth lived in quiet stares, in the way the kids pulled away, in Janelle's sudden pause when asked about updates, in Christine's fierce exit, and now, in Meri's silence finally breaking. You could see it in the Flagstaff scenes, unspoken, but loud, the coldness in his voice when Janelle invited him for the holidays, the way he looked bitter when she said her kids didn't want to see him. He didn't like being challenged. Especially not by women he once thought would always remain, until Janelle said it. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm, firm. He lost the right to speak for me. And right then, everyone in that room knew sooner or later he was going to lose the rest too. The room was plain, quiet, almost sterile. No cameras, no stage, no script, just a few chairs and the kind of spiritual silence that makes your skin feel tight. This wasn't reality TV anymore. This was sacred territory, or so they were taught. When Janelle stepped forward to ask for a spiritual release, her hands didn't shake, but her voice paused. Not because she had doubts, because she knew what this moment meant. This wasn't just a formality, not in their world. It was defiance. It was closing a door that had always been bolted from the outside. She was raised to believe this place held the power over her eternity. The men here, leaders she once trusted, were positioned by faith to decide if her spiritual bond to her husband could ever be severed without consequence. Leaving wasn't just social. It wasn't legal. It was cosmic. Divorce papers could end the earthly marriage. But in their belief system, only these men could say if she was still spiritually bound to him in the eyes of God. And there was fear in that. Fear planted long ago by teachings that said if you walked away without a release, you walked away from heaven, from your children's place in the afterlife, from your family forever. Even when it didn't make sense anymore, when love was long gone, the guilt didn't leave. That was the control. That was the chain. Meri knew it all too well. She had stood right in that same place just days earlier. Not sure what they'd say, not sure if they'd even recognize her anymore. For years, she hadn't spoken to anyone in church leadership, not since things began unraveling. She had walked out of this faith emotionally long ago, but pieces of it still hung over her like smoke from an old fire. And when she sat down and asked for her release, she didn't know what kind of reaction to expect. Yet to her surprise, they granted it immediately. No pushback, no dramatics, almost relief, because in truth, even the church saw the writing on the wall. Kody wasn't who he had once claimed to be in that system. He had failed. The family he brought them, his wives, his children, was fractured. His legacy, broken. Leadership had no interest in forcing these women to stay bound to ruins, only he still clung to. In private circles, they whispered about him being emotionally unstable, about the shame of how public his family collapse had become. They didn't want more damage connected to their name. So when Janelle asked, they were ready. Caught off guard, but ready. And she felt it instantly, not just the approval but the freedom. It didn't come from them. It came from her. For the first time in years, she got to say out loud what she had whispered to herself through countless lonely nights. This is over, not just emotionally, not just physically, spiritually, and she wouldn't have done it so decisively if Meri hadn't gently nudged her forward, not in a controlling way. In a sister-to-sister, I won't let you suffer like I did kind of way. The two of them had once been rivals, then strangers, now somehow allies. You don't owe him anymore, Meri had said days before, her voice steady, no bitterness left. If it's done, then let it be done. Janelle hesitated, not because she had doubts about leaving, but because after everything she still didn't know if she deserved peace without punishment. That's when the text came. Short, simple, clear. Just do it. She stared at the screen for a moment. No drama, no declarations, just one deep breath and then her fingers moved. Message sent. And with it, that rare, irreversible step toward herself, toward truth, toward freedom. And nothing about that moment can be undone. Robyn can feel it before anyone says a word. The air in the room shifts, heavier somehow. There's less security in Kody's tone, fewer glances toward her for reassurance. She used to be the one he leaned on when it all got messy. his advocate, his emotional translator, the calm in his storms. But lately, he's not reaching for her. He's pacing, unraveling, turning circles even she can't slow down. And that's what terrifies her most. He's slipping, and she can't pretend it's not happening. This isn't the same Robyn who cried gently on camera, the one who always said, "I just want peace." This is the woman who no longer knows what to do with the silence echoing through their once controlled household. The spotlight, once soft and sympathetic, is now sharp. It doesn't flatter anymore, it exposes. For so long, she positioned herself as the spiritual compass, the quiet peacemaker, the one who always believed in the family. But now, as Meri and Janelle step out and claim freedom for themselves, her illusion of unity is breaking apart in her hands, and there's nothing she can do to stop it. She's not crying this time. She's calculating. Because if Janelle and Meri walk away from the marriage, and worse, from the faithfulness of the covenant, what does that make her? Not a sister wife, not one of 4 pillars holding up a family. It makes her the last one standing, and not in victory, but in exposure. Alone in the role she fought so hard to frame as devotion. The truth is, the others never had the kind of control she did. From the moment she married Kody, she gained more than a spiritual connection. She gained power, legal status, financial clarity, more access, more empathy. He listened to her, defended her, took her side, even when it meant alienating his children from his other wives. That kind of power feels righteous when you truly believe you're the only one doing things right. And Robyn believed that. Maybe for a while, she still does. But now, as releases are granted without resistance and the ties that bound this family scattered across faith, land, and loyalty begin snapping loose, Robyn doesn't feel righteous. She feels hollow. Because deep down, somewhere in her gut, she knows she didn't build this kingdom on unity. It was built on proximity, access, advantage. She didn't hold them together with love. She watched them drift farther from him and quietly accepted the reward. She knew Meri was fading. She saw Christine's growing courage and didn't call it bravery, she called it betrayal. And when Janelle asked hard questions, she didn't offer solidarity, she offered silence. And now it's turned back on her. Because the truth is, those women are not broken. They're waking up, stronger, quieter, but clearer. Robyn walks the hallway now with unease. Rooms once filled with family energy now feel like set pieces. The kids still talk, but she hears the weight behind their observations. Dad seems different, they say. He used to be fun. But this isn't about fun. This was never just emotional frustration, it was foundational failure. And if she's being honest, she's not worried about the church's view of the departures. She's worried about what it leaves her with. If the other wives remove their spiritual ties, if the covenant family disbands right in front of them, then she is left standing not as the faithful one, but the final one. And what does that mean? What happens when there's no one left to be better than? When there's no one left to blame? She used to think her place was sacred, chosen, secured, but now it just feels exposed. And as she sits at the edge of the bed, watching Kody throw his frustration into calls, pacing about Christine's book or Janelle's release, Robyn finally whispers the question she's been holding in for weeks. If they leave, who are we anymore? They've watched every episode, every silent moment at the dinner table, every tight-lipped confession, every foot shuffle that said more than the voiceovers in post. The fans aren't guessing anymore. They're remembering. They're connecting dots that the show tried for years to blur. And now, in this season of unraveling, people aren't just watching Sister Wives for the drama anymore. They're watching it for the truth that keeps bleeding through no matter how hard TLC edits try to hold the story together. The comment sections aren't filled with confusion or blind loyalty the way they were 10 years ago. Now, it's heartbreak, frustration, and above all else, validation. People are saying it openly now. We always knew, we saw it back then. We just didn't have the words for it. And suddenly, the pieces look different once you realize who's really been suffering and who's been softly slipping out of accountability week after week, camera after camera. More and more viewers are finally saying out loud what they quietly suspected for years, that it wasn't just a family in decline, it was a family in a carefully constructed cage. Kody's tyranny wasn't explosive at first. It was patient, polished. It came with phrases like disrespect and you're not loyal. It wore the mask of religious conviction. And Robyn, she played her part so well it was hard to call it what it really was. Favoritism, intentional emotional distance, strategic silence, passive power, done so quietly that for years fans questioned if they were imagining it. But now, those questions have answers. Christine's exit pulled the curtain. Janelle's resistance tore what was left. Meri, people thought she was lost for good, emotionally drained, permanently stuck in the role of forgotten first. But she's not shattered anymore. There was something subtle, but undeniable in her posture during that final conversation. The kind of strength you can't fake because it doesn't look like rage, it looks like peace. Meri, the same woman who once begged for scraps of emotional intimacy from a husband who publicly ridiculed her, now stands still, calm, done, and that shook people. Because it wasn't loud. It wasn't some dramatic takedown. It was that quiet moment where the audience realized she doesn't need him to say sorry. She doesn't need him to fix it. She needed to walk away with her own clarity, and she finally has it. People cried watching her sit across from Janelle, not because it was explosive or confrontational, but because it was honest. And for once, she wasn't isolated in her pain. She was useful, compassionate, strong. Christine's healing looks like freedom. Janelle's like defiance. Meri's, it looks like stillness that doesn't need permission anymore. Meanwhile, fans aren't letting Kody and Robyn quietly rewrite the script as they fall apart. Every moment of faux repentance from Kody is being picked apart. Every carefully lit scene showing Robyn's emotional collapse is being measured against years of footage where she sat back and allowed this damage to settle quietly into the roots of their lives. And those carefully edited sequences from TLC aren't working like they used to. Fans aren't buying the narrative of the loyal husband fighting for his family. They're watching him scramble to control what's already slipped away. They're watching Robyn's pious facade begin to tremble, not under pressure from the other women, but from her own refusal to acknowledge what she helped create. The quietest shift is often the most powerful. No dramatic exits. No yelling matches, but you can feel it every time Meri smiles now, subtle, soft, sure of herself. And that's what audiences are latching onto. Not the chaos, not the fighting, but the truth that healing doesn't always arrive with a fight. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, looks around at the ruins, and says, "This doesn't belong to me anymore." And when enough people see that, when they recognize themselves in it, that's not just storytelling anymore. That's release. He's sitting in his usual chair, back hunched just slightly, hands gripping the arms like the weight of everything around him is pressing down. The confidence is gone. That booming voice, once filled with certainty and control, now cracks under the weight of trying to make sense of a reality that no longer bends to his will. Kody had always believed that if things ever collapsed, he'd see it coming. That he'd still be at the center of it all, holding court, handing down the reasons why. But this isn't collapse. This is exposure. He starts where he always does, blame. His retelling of the past comes dressed in justification. He blames the tension between Meri and Janelle for why Janelle started to pull away. He blames Christine's drive for independence for poisoning the family culture. He says Meri just never got over being misunderstood. There's always a reason. Always someone else's fault. He paints himself as the one who tried. The one who sacrificed for the sake of the group. The man who got tired of being disrespected. But no one's buying it anymore. The kids see it, even if he thinks they don't. Garrison, Gabe, even the older daughters, they've watched things quietly for years, putting together what the camera couldn't always catch. They noticed who showed up, who missed the birthdays, who chose silence over presence. And no matter how many times he tries to spin his version of how it all broke apart, his children aren't nodding along anymore. They're nodding off. Listening, but distant. Still polite, but less present. One of his daughters said it best during a private moment. He doesn't even remember what real connection looks like. And that's what eats at him. That this isn't just about wives leaving. It's about everyone emotionally checking out and not waiting for his approval anymore. Even inside the home he thinks is stable, his place with Robyn, it's not untouched. The rooms feel heavier. Robyn tries to comfort him, but it's different now. The pressure has shifted. Where once her voice calmed him, now it sounds like background noise to a storm he can't dodge. He's lashing out more with her, not explosive, but bitter. He walks through arguments like he's trying to rewrite conversations that already happened. He keeps bringing up loyalty, keeps returning to phrases like betrayal and disrespect, not realizing how empty they sound when spoken to nothing but walls. He's haunted by his own words. He remembers saying, not long ago, that he didn't consider himself married to Meri, that he felt no connection, that he was done. And now, as she walks away quietly, he realizes maybe none of them were holding on as tightly as he imagined. Maybe they were all waiting for permission he refused to give. And now that they've claimed it for themselves, he's not the authority anymore. He's just echoing. Christine left, Janelle is released, Meri followed. And now, he's not sure who he's leading. He starts talking about Christine again in a confessional, reaching back to old narrative threads like they'll protect him. But even he knows it won't work. The timelines don't match. The stories fall flat. He called Meri disloyal after she stayed. He called Christine a coward for being brave. And with Janelle, he does what he's always done, calls her defiant for not letting herself be erased. But when the cameras shut off and the talking ends, the truth hits harder than any argument. He sits at the edge of the bed, crouched forward, eyes unfocused. He opens his mouth. Nothing comes out at first. Then finally, quiet, cracked, real, I don't know why they all left. And in that moment, neither does he. Because the man who once claimed them all no longer recognizes the life he's built. And that's what breaks him. Not the leaving, but the lost control. There's no celebratory tone. No grand moment of vindication. Just two women sitting across from each other, years of silence hanging between them like fog that's finally started to lift. They aren't laughing. They aren't crying. But there's a calm to the room now, a stillness that feels earned. Janelle and Meri don't need to say much anymore. The things that once filled those gaps with tension, old wounds, awkward pauses, secondhand resentment, don't matter like they used to. What they're walking into now isn't about Kody. It's not about validating their side of the story. It's about something much quieter and much stronger. Forward motion. They never called each other. Not really. For years, if a text came through, it meant something urgent, usually to do with land or logistics. There was no friendship, no easing into anything emotional. Everything between them had been shaped by structure, roles, schedules, spiritual rules that told them how much space they were allowed to take up in a man's household. For decades, they orbited around the same center in different directions, never quite colliding, but never aligning either. Until now. And it wasn't some dramatic realization. It started in small conversations, check-ins after that meeting with the church, contact about shared property, even acknowledgement about the absurd way things had been handled. No exaggerated forgiveness, no grand apologies. Just truth, mutual, quiet understanding that the roles they were told to play weren't who they actually were. Janelle had once seen Meri as distant, sometimes difficult. Hard to connect with. Meri saw Janelle as rigid, emotionally closed off. Maybe there was some truth in those assessments. But now, they see something else. They were never each other's enemies. They were just placed on opposite sides of someone else's control. One quietly adjusts to her new world of independence. Janelle doesn't talk about freedom with fireworks. She's measured, focused. She's thinking about her boys, about her land, about her own well-being. There's exhaustion in her tone, but no bitterness. She's not wasting energy anymore. She's building something without asking anyone's permission. Meri, for her part, has become quieter, but not small. She's observant now in a way that feels different. No longer trying to prove anything. No longer walking into family gatherings hoping someone will throw her a line of affection. She's finally held space for herself, and it shows. They take a walk together, something simple, casual, around the edge of Coyote Pass. It's the same land that used to represent a dream. One household, one property. One big idea that only worked if everyone played their part and no one questioned the script. But now it has a new meaning. It's not symbolic of unity anymore. It's a clean piece of land, a beginning. For whoever wants to start again, or walk away. There's a moment, quiet and short, where neither of them says anything. They both know what it means. Years ago, this silence would have been full of discomfort or judgment. But now, it feels peaceful. They don't need to go back. They don't need to fix that old story. They've already stepped out of it. And as they turn back toward the road, Meri says it, not loudly, but with a stillness that cuts through all the years of trying, pleasing, and waiting. I'm not his problem anymore. And Janelle doesn't smile, but she nods, because she knows exactly what that means. It's not anger, it's release, and that's all they ever needed. It wasn't just one wife walking away, it never was. This story, what we've been watching unfold for over a decade, was never just about plural marriage. It was about women learning to listen to themselves again. Slowly, painfully, quietly. And when they did, the silence began to speak louder than any family meeting ever could. For so long, the framework of the Brown family was presented as choice, faith, unity. They said it was built on love, trust, and a shared goal. But now, we've seen what it really was. A structure held up by sacrifice, mostly from the women. Christine was the first to crack it wide open. Not with anger, not with screaming or shattering dishes. She simply said, "No more." And that small act, that brave step, rewrote everything that came after. When she packed up her things and moved to Utah, when she looked into Kody's eyes and calmly declared that she was done, it was so much more than a breakup. It was a seismic shift. She showed the other women that walking away didn't lead to exile. It didn't lead to ruin. It led to air, space, a pulse again. For the first time in years, someone in that family remembered what it felt like to be whole. Janelle saw it, Meri did too, and while Christine lit the match, they were the ones who let it spread. This isn't bitterness, it's clarity. And let's be honest, if there's ever going to be any kind of reunification, it won't be a return. It'll be a reinvention. Because the kingdom Kody tried to build, the one where everyone revolved around his version of leadership, is gone. Maybe he doesn't see it yet. Maybe Robyn still clings to it, hoping to graft a new version of peace onto old wounds. But that kingdom collapsed the moment the women realized they had nothing to prove anymore. Now, if anything new rises from the ashes, it won't be on one man's terms. It will belong to them. But what truly sits heavy beneath all this isn't the divorce paperwork or the spiritual releases. It's all the years they spent thinking things might change if they loved harder, if they kept showing up. What a quiet tragedy it is to watch women wonder if they're the problem while everyone else benefits from their silence. Meri spent years trying to earn her way back into something that had no space left for her. Janelle gave everything she had, her youth, her energy, her loyalty, and still sat across from a man who couldn't acknowledge what she meant to the family without rerouting the credit. Christine raised children in a system that taught her to shrink her expectations. And when they each realized that none of it was sacred if it hurt them every single day, that's when the story finally shifted. And maybe that's what we've really been watching. Not a reality show, not a family falling apart, but people climbing out of roles they never chose and finally asking, "Who am I when I'm not surviving?" There's no final scene that wraps this up in a perfect red bow. There's no tidy sit-down where everything is forgiven, everyone embraces, and they walk into the sunset together. Instead, there's a shot of Janelle, alone, quiet, walking across the land that once symbolized unity. Her pace is steady, her expression unreadable, no fanfare, no speech, just freedom on her face. She earned it. So did Meri, so did Christine. But after watching all of this, it leaves a question hanging. Do you think freedom came too late or exactly on time? Let me know in the comments, because I read them.